Welcome. This is the Late Late Show with BT, where views with security and law are being provided to you, the public. So all this week we focused on comedy, um, and with Playboy and Cosmopolitan. So the publishings for this show are going to include Cosmopolitan January 2015, and all of those Playboys, of which the jokes came from. So that's going to be October 2015, November 2015, December 2015, and January, February 2016. I mentioned that we're not going to add in ModWise, um, but I reconsidered shortly after the show. And so we're going to include ModWise season 1 interviewings as well. And using topics. It's 27 things to do this month. Strike gold with the A-list cast of financial crash dramedy, The Big Short. Number 15. Backing it up to number 11, after a bona fide breakout 2015, her next album, Wildfire, is likely to spread like wildfire. And 25 of 27 things to do. The bitingly witty actor from Wet Hot American Summer and Another Period invites us to get all up in his business. Confessions. Monica W. 25. I looked at him, expecting it to be a joke, but he was full on serious. But the best resolutions have more to do with the way we feel than what we wear. From a novel by the author of The Talented Mr. Ripley, Carol. Just keep the bleach pin handy. You don't have to break the bank to look #flawless. Ready to breathe some life into your wardrobe? Andrea Arterbury. Combing the aisles, I wondered why the darker shades were stashed on the bottom shelves, collecting dust. Why do I have to bring my own makeup to a professional fashion show when all the white girls don't have to do anything but show up? She asked. Considering that the U.S. Census Bureau predicts that the majority of the country will be minorities by the mid-2040s and African Americans alone already make up almost 15% of the U.S. population, you'd think beauty brands would want to keep pace with the marketplace. I called about a dozen major brands from CoverGirl to Clinique to get to the bottom of the problem. Perception is one part of the equation, agrees Global Beauty Industry Analysis at the NPD Group, which tracks retail trends. Yet, look at MAC. They offer a wide range of skin tones at their stores located across the U.S., and women buy them, she says, adding to the #1 prestige brand in the country. For a caramel hue, there may be too much red or yellow, which can leave skin looking orange. But there have been advances. It's comparable to Bobbi Brown's Skin Foundation Stick, a favorite among women of color for years, which has 24 shades, with 5 deeper shades launching in April. Vice President of Global Market global product development for MAC Cosmetics, says the brand relies heavily on its makeup artists to alert them to which shades are needed most. He recounts how the makeup artists in one of the Paris stores were inspired by the Black women of Africa's Ivory Coast who shopped there. We came up with a plan that helped us in our expansion into Africa. And as a result of this, shade NW58, a warm chocolate, was brought to North America. Chanel is also prioritizing the issue, expect a wider range of liquid foundation shades by the middle of the year. But perhaps the bigger sign of progress is that some brands are finally starting to realize that Black women aren't all the same shade, nor are we a niche consumer. Beauty with Lauren Balsamo. The beauty equivalent of a cozy sweater, this cashmere-like cream. And it's hydrating cream with shea butter plus vitamin E. Beauty, The Wire. Ditch the beauty comfort zone. The weather, hormones, even styling habits can throw it out of whack, and that's when the trouble starts. Collapsing on the couch just got better. Beauty. Take a breather. Uses one of the lowest doses of the hormone progesterone of any birth control on the market. So side effects that appear to be hormonal may actually be unrelated. If not, it may be worth talking to your doctor about finding a BC method that's better for you. I often tell patients to use shampoo because if it's for your head, it's going to be gentle. Source Jennifer Ashton, MD, OBGYN, and Senior Medical Director, Medical Contributor for ABC News. Apple bottom. Apple bottom to booty booster. Complimentary margaritas, Instagram worthy sunsets, balmy weather. What could possibly make vacation better? Mind-blowing orgasms, doy. Whether you're on the beach or just visiting your in-laws, sex on location is a super hot ticket to paradise. Virginia Kelly. 53% of Americans and 68% of millennials support legalization, according to a March 2015 survey by the Pew Research Center, which means plenty of people may be wondering the same thing as Cali. Might pot be better for you than alcohol? They seem to be right. Last year, researchers compared the deadliness of 10 substances for a study published in scientific reports. Booze and tobacco were among the top 4. In modest amounts, marijuana doesn't cause terrible harm to anyone's health, says MD, director of the Center for Medicinal Cannabis Research at the University of California of San Diego. Pot may turn out to be a more virtuous vice than booze, but that doesn't mean getting baked is good for you. And doctor points out that the brain is still developing until age 24 or 25. It can't compare to the health effects of tobacco, partly because, as doctor notes, people don't smoke a pack of joints a day. Compared with the first 6 months of 2013, the murder rate in Denver, Colorado, dropped by 38% in 2014. The first year you could lawfully buy pot. Knows the only person to blame for her rape is a rapist. Pot-related road fatalities appear to be rising. About 12% of U.S. drivers in fatal accidents in 2010 had cannabinoids in their system, up from 4.2% in 1999. One could argue that drunk driving is worse, but that doesn't mean pot is safe. Pot ends the bottom line. People are used to buying weed on the black market with no idea about quality, he says. As consumers get more sophisticated, they'll demand higher quality and better testing. And if weed has protective qualities that might help healthy women, it remains to be seen. In those places where it is legal, it's up to individuals to decide if pot is lifting them up or holding them back. After the trauma of her sexual assault, she admits she abused pot for months, getting high several times a day to be numb. I found a therapist and my grades got better. Smoking so much just put a band-aid on what was really bothering me. Virginia Peller. Beach reads for the bedroom. Sex Q&A. What can we try that mimics me being on bottom without him flattening me? What can we try that mimics me being on bottom without him flattening me? I don't know. The bottom? I don't know. What's the best sex toy that costs less than my lunch? Loop it around your or his corner finger and try its hour-long buzz everywhere. On your nipples, your clit, at the base of his shaft for foreplay that feels like $1,000,000. On the beach. How about? This year, you're vowing to be a better daughter, sister, girlfriend, staffer. The good news is, it's easier than you think to get there. Love with the guy, Logan Hill. Your BF might feel pressured to hide his shaky finances from friends, but he needs to brush up on romance finance 101. Invest in your relationship if you want it to grow. After all, if orgasms were involved, there were a few better things to celebrate. When that's the only way to be with you, he'll be more willing to get on board. A jackass might be turned on by deflowering a virgin, but the way a guy reacts will tell you a lot about him quickly. You thought there was only one kind of sweater weather? Knit crop tops, pencil skirts and dresses. Meet bathing suits and shorts for a look that's more pina colada than PSL. Beauty tip. Before the interview, here's everything to do between that moment and the big day. You went to bed at a respectable hour, you left the house with plenty of time to spare, and you are not throwing away your shot. Break the ice. Bring the energy. The bad suit. Michelle DeFeo. She tells how to break in when you have exactly 0 connections. In high school, I studied French and became the first person in my family to get a passport since we'd immigrated. Coming from a background where every dollar counted, I understand that if I'm asking someone to invest in one of our bottles, it better be fantastic. Beauty tip. Lauren Basamo. Time to get your beauty sleep. If you have red or painful cyst-like bumps, signs of bacteria overload, opt for antibacterial benzoyl peroxide, explains Eric Schwager, MD, a dermatologist in Manhattan. As the top layers of your skin soak up the moisture, the barrier on the surface looks plump and dewy. Use your fingertip to buff in small circles or apply the scrub to a toothbrush for more intense exfoliation, says doctor. As you buff, you'll increase plumpness by boosting circulation as well as clear dead skin, so lips can better absorb the soothing ingredients in a balm or overnight lip mask. If you're sleep deprived, your blood flow kicks into high gear thanks to a spike in cortisol, showing up in the form of dark under eye circles. They're actually engorged blood vessels beneath the surface. Their texture is cooling, which helps contract blood vessels, and soothing cornflower helps to brighten over time. At this point in the morning, 10 a.m., your body temp peaks, increasing circulation, says NYC Derm. Question: what's the difference between a stock, a bond, and a fund? Those type of things would just seem kind of, uh, challenging, but sometimes the point of that is you don't want to go into something until you are with the knowing of it, or you know it yourself, or you know enough that you're on path and stay on path. And that could be a difference between a stock, a bond, and a fund. Neither one is easier to be, to support or be affiliated with. But I would say that the most challenging one would be the fund, and that it would be sort of like a entry level to becoming a part of the stock and or the bond community. So you would probably want to start with a fund, and correct all of those areas as much as you can, or get in a community that maybe they corrected at least one with the fund, and then maybe you could use that as a referral for a stock or a bond. And that's the difference. Your relationship and your character makes the difference. So women battling cancer is hope. Joy victory. How can that be? Stomach acid and red Powerade splatter across the kitchen floor, up the walls, and the refrigerator, leaving tiny blood-like rivulets. Yet at my prenatal visits at the midwife clinic, where I was a patient, no one seemed concerned. Not even when I showed up to the hospital in labor with my blood pressure at 143/99 and a pulse of 120, both well above normal. In fact, I had some of the hallmark signs of a condition I was only vaguely aware of then: preeclampsia, a mysterious syndrome of the placenta that affects blood flow between mother and baby. For the baby, this can include restricted growth, premature birth, and death. For the mom, organ failure, stroke, seizures, and when I found out I was pregnant in 2012, I assumed the biggest risks I faced as a healthy, well-educated, privately insured New Yorker were interventions. After nearly a century of enormous strides in saving women from in childbirth, the rate of major complications more than doubled between 1998 and 2011, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. For every 10,000 delivery hospitalizations in 2010 and 2011, about 163 women had a severe complication, like needing a blood transfusion, or hysterectomy, or having cardiac arrest, sepsis, or seizures. The rate of maternal deaths, too, more than doubled between 1987 and 2011. Other issues affect all pregnant women. Many communities don't have enough obstetric specialists, and labor and delivery wards tend to be especially understaffed. This was at one of the best maternity care hospitals in this country, she says, not some backwoods operation. And I was so prepared for the baby's birth, his well-being and health. Sometimes providers don't believe the vital signs, doctor says. The amniotic fluid, normally clear, is tainted by meconium, a baby's first bowel movement. As soon as exits my body, a doctor from the neonatal intensive care unit swoops into action, placing a tube down her throat to remove the meconium. In spite of her rough start, she is beautiful, with long limbs, puckered lips, blonde peach fuzz for hair, and fat cheeks, but her breathing is raspy. They placed in my arms long enough for Brendan to get a photo. I glanced toward the blood pressure cuff on my arm. Am I to blame? She is taken to the NICU and given breathing assistance and antibiotics. The word sounds beautiful, and I repeat it in my head. Demands better help. Eventually, I take off the cuff, grab a bottle of breast milk. Through it all, I have been dutifully pumping and head to the NICU. Between the health care we have and the health care we could not, between the health care we have and the health care we could have lies not just a gap, but a chasm. Doctor is spearheading a major effort, the National Partnership for Maternal Safety, to ensure that birthing facilities have safety programs in place for the most common preventable causes of maternal, did I say death, and serious complications, hemorrhage, severe hypertension, and blood clots. Core to California's success have been patient safety toolkits that can be downloaded and used by any birthing facility, and which exhaustively covers standardized methods of detection, diagnosis, treatment, and management of issues. The blood pressure meds seem to have worked, and after a liver ultrasound shows no signs of rupture, I'm clear for discharge. My anxiety lingers, triggered by a combination of cardiac disease, psychological stress, and medication side effects. Now, more than 2 years later, those reminders lie hidden behind the life we've created. Joy Victory. 2016 Bedside Astrologer. We all like the touching, but don't forget the looking, listening, and tasting. Double booty. They call it double booty. The breakdown. In The Perfect Weapon, William Wheeler details this ongoing collision between technology and firearms. An ongoing collision between technology and firearms. The battle over the worst movie ever made. Eric Altz. And when Team USA's missed an empty net by inches at the 2014 Winter Games, It sparked the birth of National Women's Hockey League. Agonizing near miss in the ensuing Canadian gold medal victory was the hockey story out of Saudi. Despite a men's final that boasted two teams whose rosters read like an NHL all-star program. Now, a little over a year later, the first professional women's hockey league makes its debut with an original four: the Boston Pride, the New York Riveters, the Buffalo Beauts, and the Connecticut Whale, all determined to establish a thriving, high-profile future for the NWHL, just as the WNBA has done for women's basketball. Coming off the 2014 Olympics, where the women's gold medal game was the highest watched event on NBC with 4.9 million viewers, it seemed like a missed opportunity for the sport if there wasn't a league paying these women for being the best at what they do, says NWHL co-founder and commissioner. Asked about expansion, says the league intends to build for the long haul, but is focused first on making year one a success. The NHL has a perfect opportunity with the Winter Classic this year to incorporate the Boston Pride and the New York Riveters for a matinee game. But to get the league off the ground, they need a superstar, just like the NHL. Eric Hall. The New Horizons spacecraft traveled 3 billion miles on a groundbreaking mission to Pluto. 3 Pluto missions, $2 billion. Cost equals, so 3 Pluto missions, which is $2 billion, equals the cost of the 2012 U.S. presidential election. 17 Pluto missions, coming in at $11.8 billion, equals the amount Americans spend on bottled water in 1 year. Robert B. DeSalvo. After 140 million people vanish in something akin to the biblical rapture, the leftover folks struggle with survivor's guilt. So we are still in news and topics. This time with Joel Stein. My ears itching. Joel Stein. Not because they aren't just as capable as men, but because they have no need to do these things. What's the point of going to a party, asking a woman out, taking her on a romantic walk over a bridge, and casually saying, "Why, this is the bridge I designed," when you can just type "hey" without ever having to design a bridge? If trends continue by 2020, only half of all men under 25 will be able to walk. During the Renaissance, which occurred before texting, men were expected to paint, invent, write poetry, discuss philosophy, and compose music, because you never knew what would get a Renaissance woman particularly excited. I am not at all impressed by the Sistine Chapel, David, or the Last Supper. Everyone worries about the fact that not enough college students are majoring in technology, but they don't realize that this is because of technology. I have a really bad feeling it's going to be the latter. And now we're at the perfect weapon by William Wheeler. It's going well, Wilson explains. His latest product, the Ghost Gunner, is a $1,500 machine that helps anyone with basic technical know-how to build an unlimited number of untraceable assault rifles, regardless of criminal record or mental health status. The clerk has been following the story in the news, but the store's lone customer, a squat man with a white handlebar mustache, is caught off guard. In May, Wilson filed a lawsuit arguing that as digital code, the blueprints constitute speech protected by the First Amendment beyond the censure of federal authorities. I finally get to sue the feds because they overplayed their hand, he says, smiling. The range is closed, but Wilson has driven all the way from Austin, expecting to be an exception. They like him, but that's not a unanimous opinion here. At one end of the range, an old-timer sits at a firing bench, cradling what looks to be a .50 caliber rifle fitted with a scope. Downrange, the land slopes gently up into a dusty plain speckled with green, the legacy of devastating floods that washed across Texas just a few weeks before. The middle ground consists of 4 berms at various distances. A gun has many parts, but the only part on which the federal government stamps a serial number, the gun, in legal terms, is the frame, around which the other parts on an assault rifle are built. As with the rest of the parts, any amateur gunsmith can buy a nearly finished and unregistered receiver, then drill a few strategically placed holes to build an untraceable weapon. But then Wilson finds a bigger problem. Rather than build out a whole new gun, he brought along his Colt AR-15, hoping to substitute the newly machined lower receiver for the stock part in his expensive store-bought rifle. But there were traces of what would become his trademark brand of provocative entrepreneurialism, selling candy in competition with approved school fundraisers and pocketing the money, or selling the answers to tests from digital material he discovered his teacher was using. He left the impression of someone just looking for reasons to blow something up. He was also obsessed with military history and the sort of gun nerdisms that bored Wilson, who was more fascinated by the idea of the gun as the implement of political realism. He became obsessed with a singular question: what would be the equivalent of WikiLeaks for guns? By that time, however, the files had already been downloaded more than 100,000 times. They remain widely available on the internet today. The regulations also define technical data broadly: a diagram, a model, a formula, a table, design specification, CAD files. So that's for yours truly, he says. The suit's central premise revives a legal argument made in the 1990s after the Department of Justice began to investigate cryptographers who were sharing powerful encryption tools online, which the government considered military munitions. In this argument, code, whether it conveys knowledge about how to protect communications or how to build a firearm, constitutes speech protected by the First Amendment, and ITAR imposes an unconstitutional prior restraint on that speech. Legal scholars have called Wilson's suit a novel and unsettled argument for the digital age, as technologies such as 3D printing continue to blur the difference between a thing and instructions on how to make it. And the internet serves as a means of instant worldwide distribution. Aided by technology, he hopes the spread of digital contraband, whether CAD files shared on sites too numerous to prosecute, or drug sales, facilitated by dark wallet, it says here, and its copycats too inscrutable to monitor, will render the rules practically impossible to enforce and the law essentially irrelevant. He also keeps an extensive press list categorized by the likelihood of favorable coverage. He described the Ghost Gunner as both a gift to his red state base and an example of shrewd but cynical capitalism, preying on the insecurities of clients who will likely never use his product, but feel empowered by the very prospect of doing so. The quest for a smarter gun can be traced to 1886, after D.B. Wesson, a founding partner of Smith & Wesson, learned that a child had been injured playing with one of his company's products. Wesson asked his son to design a child-proof handgun, a revolver with a metal lever on the back that had to be depressed as the trigger was pulled in order to fire. A subsequent boycott of Smith & Wesson sent fear into the hearts of gun manufacturers that should they break ranks and start to make safer guns, they could be severely punished, says the founding director of the Center for Gun Policy and Research at Johns Hopkins University. The United States should collect data on gun fatalities just as it does on auto fatalities to craft better prevention policies, he says. But in the past few years, the NRA has used its influence in Congress to repeatedly curtail funding for research by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that would have gathered that information. The leading contender to do so has been the IP-1, a .22 caliber pistol designed by the German arms manufacturer. Her name and phone number and a photo of the location of her post office box were posted on an online gun enthusiast forum. And she began to get menacing calls. But after the club's owner told the Washington Post the gun would revolutionize the industry, a wave of social media threats to boycott the club, the deal. The race to build that is global. California company has created a gun that can be remotely tracked and disengaged by the owner via an app or website. When you pull the trigger, if there's a bullet in the chamber, the bullet comes out. But they will be more reliable than the status quo. If you introduce electronics into the products are going to be more reliable. That has been the trend with all products for many decades. But the state's attorney general issued a report denying that the IP-1 meets the statutory definition of a smart gun. They're not willing to say they want to take it away from you, but they kind of look with turned up lips and use market language. Do I really believe that? But I'm trying to be the monster or the mascot for that idea. But hold his feet to the fire. And on principle, his answer is that neither technology should be suppressed by the state. Terrible things are coming, he says. Kids are going to be able to experiment with gene sequences, and it will be terrifying. I'm able to rattle the chain back to people's deepest feelings about what America was supposed to be, about where history was supposed to go, and what patriotism is, and what it means to be a free man. William Will. Joseph Gordon-Levitt with David Hockman. Contributing writer David Hockman, who last interviewed Dr., spent time with Gordon-Levitt in a downtown Los Angeles hotel featured in both The Dark Knight Rises and 500 Days of Summer. The people are supposed to be the ones in control. What? What? In the butt? As part of its annual Sex Week, Harvard offered instruction on the do's and don'ts of entering through the back door. Tasteless beer. Although proceeds go to charity, paying tribute to a man who helped cover up a sex abuse scandal is unpalatable. Girls of the Big 12. There are 10 schools in the Big 12 conference, but with a straight A class of co-eds, this good looking, who's counting? The battle over the worst movie ever made. News and topics. John Pavlis. You suspect, in fact, that some kind of literacy is being defined out there beyond your kin, and you worry you or your kids will be rendered illiterate if you don't get with the program, that you'll be left behind if you don't learn code. The op-eds in the online courses in Business Week are informative, but they can wait. It's better to take pre-existing solutions and package them. The best code is no code at all. I want veterinarians to be veterinarians, explains. One measure of progress in the computer industry is that we no longer require people to become programmers to do things with computers. Sandbox-style video games such as Minecraft are programming environments, essentially, he says, because they provide open-ended opportunities to discover how a system works by messing around with it, a much more fundamental and versatile skill than writing JavaScript. Steve Jobs claimed, the minute that you understand that you can poke life in something will pop out the other side, you'll never be the same again. Who the F knows what programming is going to be in 10, 20, 40 years, he says. Inputting values and formulas into cells, arranging them and hooking them up to one another in ways that don't break. That's programming. Because the admiration has nothing to do with the code they wrote. It's often assumed that by training everyone to code, we'll empower a generation of not just system thinkers capable of understanding the complexity of things like climate change, globalized economies, and Snapchat, but also system doers like Steve Jobs. What if solar power and wall-mounted battery packs replaced fossil fuels? Of course, as legendary computer scientists once remarked, you have to have something blue to have blue thoughts with. To stay with the future as it moves, he said, is to always play your systems more grand than they seem to be right now. You don't have to be scared. Jessica Ogilvy. To be sure, technology and sex have always met on the cutting edge. Users' feet tingle when they approach the edge of a virtual building. If they turn to face a type, they feel a rush of blood to their extremities. It is also likely to refine the boundaries between censorship, technology, and sexual liberties new technologies have in the past. By 2002, the industry generated $1 billion, and by 2013, pornographic websites had more visitors than Netflix, Amazon, and Twitter combined. This June, a Facebook representative told Business Insider that pornography will be forbidden from the Oculus store, but developers will likely be able to release uncensored content for the headset independently. Jessica Ogilvy. Girls of the Big 12, Tart Party Schools, 20Q, The Interview, and so on and so on. They're bold, bawdy, edgy, and seductive, but which playmate has what it takes to be named Miss Black Hearts? You can vote at playboy.com, Miss Black Heart. Or were you there? Did you? Derek Waters. On Comedy Central's vaguely historical sketch series, Drunk History, A rotating cast of Hollywood A-listers delivers boozy lectures on American icons, including Honest Abe, Billy the Kid, and Elvis. A magazine that showed beautiful women posing nude, plus hilarious cartoons, jokes, and in-depth interviews with people you wanted to hang out with. Playboy was the Bible for men. I was hooked back then and remain a lover and a fan. I passed the test, but I think the only reason I did is because one thing has remained the same: how playmates look at you. I'm glad I took the test, but I had a dark thought afterward. Is it effed up that I just did that to a picture that was taken before I was born? Again, name Derek Matthew Waters. Ambitions: to be a playmate. The first edition was printed in 1970, but in December 1985, the Library of Congress removed it from its roster of 36 Braille magazines. One imagines it was a difficult 8 months for the blind with no Playboy. The first issue of Playboy that clearly showed pubic hair was January 1971, featuring playmates in the midst of the so-called pubic wars between Penthouse and Playboy. Has accomplished many things no other man has, but his greatest feat may be that he made a rabbit sexy. You have to be a genius to look at a rodent and say, it's sort of sexy. Not so much the eyes, the legs, the nose, or the feet, but those ears and tail are darn sexy. That's why I'm inspired by the Playboy interview. The best are when the subject is comfortable enough to be perfectly frank and honest. Most people know Playboy has a smart audience and doesn't pass judgment. The best ideas are the ones that know what they are. If you're a man between the ages of 18 and 80, Playboy is meant for you. Or is that 18 and uh, uh, um, not, 18, 96, I don't know, 97, 100, 98, 99, between the ages of 18 and 99. Anyway, if you're a man between the ages of 18 and 80, Playboy is meant for you. He also went into how it isn't a family magazine, which is weird because the first Playboy I saw was read to me by my parents. I ask you, the reader, who has to be featured in it? With photography by Paul Siri-Silly. How to Bite a Dog. Joel Stain. Still news and topics. But the rest of you need to unstrap your chesty, unmount your helmet, cam, unvelcro your waist, unvelcro your wrists, and for God's sake, take the $60 fetch dog harness off your pit bull. I've seen one video from a dog's perspective, and all I learned from it is that canines befriended humans because dogs are so boring. They're even boring to other dogs. But usually it's horrifying sneakers paired with suits, fish hooks on baseball caps, grown men wearing jerseys with players' names on the back, the entire 1980s leg warmers, sweatbands, wristbands, and those giant eyeglasses that I assume were meant for racquetball. So be aware, bro. that no matter how sweet the footage from your rad adventures trip to Costa Rica, when you post it online, you've just done the modern version of boring your dinner guests with slides of your vacation. I still thought that was going to be with wet slides of your vacation. But no, it's just slides of your vacation. A candid conversation with film's ultimate villain about battling Bond, interpreting Tarantino, and deciphering the German sense of humor. Typecasting is not in itself a bad thing, but it can be. Typecasting is not in itself a bad thing. Christopher Stainer with illustration by Mario Wagner. We let today's algorithms make more decisions for us than we do ourselves. Will the cyber servant soon become the master? Humankind still rules the world we live in, but the seeds of our demise were like ancient DNA, planted long ago. Fate and free will, always fodder for philosophical sparring, have become the subjects of even murkier absolutes as algorithms, snips of computer code, insert themselves into nearly every decision and process in our lives. Even the most complex bits of life can be reduced to binary decisions. If this, then that. If that, then this. Illustration. Why bother working the bar crowd when a dating site algorithm from OkCupid can deliver matched personalities by the dozens? A system so comprehensive has to be complicated. But that noise says was my focus. But the NIMH told him succinctly, we don't think computers can do what you think they can. Remembers. Helped get his study funded. And the two began to work on automating the task of reading human faces for everything they betray. Joining their project was a doctoral student who in the 1990s began to apply machine learning algorithms to the problem. The more data such algorithms consume, the smarter they become. At this point, the software has become far better than any human at reading faces. Initial reactions, gut reactions, were betrayed by slight changes in their facial expressions, usually lasting far less than a second, when they got the first whiff of a scent. That gut reaction, driven by the brain's amygdala, is what dictates most decisions. The amygdala is separate from the part of the brain that drives logic and speech, which are what produce the results in participant surveys. This reality doesn't sit well with creator of all the logic behind the algorithms. Advocates for humans to spend more time at labor without the artificial proxy of software between them and the job. We can't allow ourselves to be carried along by the technological current wherever it may be taking us, or we can push against it. Right. But in the past year, three of the biggest minds in science have separately expressed warnings about software so intelligent it could seize humanity's place as Earth's dominant force. The brilliant theoretical physicists told the BBC the primitive forms of artificial intelligence we already have proved very useful. Perhaps most foreboding are the thoughts of businessman and inventor who has repeatedly sounded the alarm with tweets such as, we need to be super careful with AI. has consistently done things that others considered impossible, building Tesla Motors into a major force and founding SpaceX, a private company that designs, manufactures, and launches rockets into space for a fraction of the money NASA and other space race incumbents have spent. But the algorithms didn't access data about birthplace or parents. They made this critical judgment based on a person's browser and web surfing histories. Not only are they cheaper than humans, but they're better at patrolling our borders. So far, the bot has proved far more effective than humans at finding liars. We should be seeking out the bomber, not the bombs, he says. Algorithms could certainly be programmed to look for facial giveaways that indicate a person is hiding something or is on the brink of committing a violent act. You can take into account the myriad differences between human beings that should affect their sentencing. Thanks, applying algorithms to the issue could help all states better figure out who should stay in prison and who is worth the gamble, given the savings of being released. As the economy gets better, people aren't going to give a anymore, he says. The algorithm the U.S. State Department uses as part of its diversity immigrant visa program is supposed to pick a group of applicants at random to be awarded visas each year. The episode devastated many people who lost what they believed to be legitimate entry to the United States. It sounds ridiculous, but the concept is a rudimentary one within computer science. Most programmers, when creating web and mobile applications, create a parallel set of tests. Fairness is ultimately better determined by code than by humans. Rather than be alarmed, some of the best informed minds on the subject welcome algorithmic rule. Whereas the author argues for more piloting of planes by humans, thinks the better answer, the obvious answer, is to get rid of humans in the cockpit altogether. It's natural for humans to both fear and find disgusting matters in which a machine can do better than or replace them, says. When machines can play chess or create something better, it's maddening. We simply must hope that by the time algorithms are doing everything that they enjoy having their original creators, the soft, corporal, needy, and primitive versions of wetware called humans around for company. So this is a little different. I would separate fiction and for a different segment. For this purpose of this, we're going to keep it in news and topics with a news and topics focus. So this is a fiction by Steve Weddle and illustration by Jonathan Bartlett. Of which, we are now in the beyond serious topics with this fiction. And it's called South of Bradley, an old country revenge story. He backed the truck next to a box of a gas station across from a cemetery. Sign misspelled. When walked in, the man behind the counter stopped talking to the TV, nodded hello, arms like sticks you use to spit roast a squirrel t-shirt with some saying on it, something clever, faded now from 20 years of coin-op dryers, wadded in the bottom of Sunday morning laundry piles. A beard that was just coming in patches these days, a thick clump weeding up under the jaw, white and black. A man who took to just eating the smaller catfish bones as he found them because, hell, why bother? A baseball cap, he said, was lucky. Torn mesh in the back, raised just above a crown of sweat on his forehead. Hanging loose over the t-shirt, a thin flannel with a pocket that no longer held anything. Aging away at the corners, little holes where things used to be stitched together. The man wiped nothing from his chin. A leftover habit and a life of leftovers went back to the TV. The door to the cooler was already leaning open, wet fog inside clear doors, where he might have drawn a smiley face when he was a kid. Traveling Arkansas back roads with his parents before they died, before he'd spent his teenage years in jails and homes, before any of it. The inside fog now cooled to the backs of his fingers, dragging along, the caked blood between his knuckles falling away as he wiped his hand on his shirt. A mister said, figuring he had to say more, had to give the man something to hold on to, something to believe, even the truth. Everything cut through CCC roads, fire roads, log runs. Every so often, an old storm dropped oaks nobody bothered to clean, lying there, waiting for coons and foxes, flaking, kindling back into the earth. He stood next to the only other car around, a little red foreign thing, community college sticker in the back window, graduation tassel hanging from the mirror. In between his 6 months here, 9 to 12 there, the gap between them, too great sometimes, the everything between them, the everything being tied up in that. The questions that didn't have any answers, but the looking for brought out. The steps, pieced together with yard-found stones and cinder blocks, porch planks coming to jagged ends where someone, years back, stepped a boot too heavy. Got to be a reason, the nurse went on, neck skin tightening, loosening a map of rivers and roads no one must travel now. The nurse nodded, seemed to feel better. Was standing to Mister's right side. Was watching the front door across the bed. The nurse passed the foot of the bed near the wall. Haven't been there in a coon's age. If you're gonna shoot him, do it in the back. Looked across the table to where she propped the old man into a chair, like a busted piece of farm equipment you didn't get rid of. Might need someday. The old man tilted his head, tightened his eyes for a better look. You asking me why I shot him or why he had to be shot? He said the boy would have done shot him if he had a mind to. The two of them across from the table asked the old man if the nurse was going for the cops. Set the pistol on the table in front of him, barrel aimed to Mister's left ear. It's a dangerous thing to be loved by a king, he said. Leaned forward a little, pulled his chair closer to the table. If you're about to tell me Ma Barker killed my grandpa, I'm going to be a little upset with you, mister. See, the man who was pretty much running most of the county and some of Lafayette and Union too, that was a fellow by the name of Cribble. Angled out his elbows, pulled them back in like chicken wings, refusing to snap. Figure your granddaddy had the sense to settle down the family. Lucy, the baby. Belle the ball, your grandmother. Doc's having lunch at the Chatterbox. Then come one morning, Doc's having lunch at the Chatterbox up in Magnolia. When JD walks in, drops this package on the table, and walks out. Breathed. Jesus. The old man slid his fingers around the coffee cup, looked into the bottom, grounds washing around like rotten tea leaves, slurped down the dregs, wiped his chin. Your grandpa hightails it back to the house. But that's one person can always take care of herself well, as anybody, I figure. Ain't no telling back then what they was capable of. Back then, anyhow. Lucy always said how it wasn't that big a problem if money could fix it. Had been trying to talk him out of it. So he's coming back and he picks me up to bring me back because I've been staying around there to talk to some people about the lake, the one for the paper mill, and I figure I got one last chance to talk him out of this. But that was always his thing, the figuring out. The baby. Before long, you're back to burning houses and putting another judge in the ground. The old man looked off at the wall behind, moved his sight along whatever was back there. He looks at me then. Whatever fool look I have on my face sees right through me like he just figured out how to take down the bank from the inside. Said he better do right by her. Told him he better hold on to what he's got before it gets taken away from him. Asked what he meant by that. I said he had to keep her out of this trouble. And he said she was a grown darn woman that could take care of herself, and just kept on laughing. We done these things for years, and then we come out of the hole together, and we could have kept on, but there, I shot him. Because that's what he'd done. Pulled out what looked like a little stick of gum, slid it onto the table, met the old man's hand halfway, held the tie pin, the blue circle in the middle, the dot of light centered, took the gun off the table, clicked open the cylinder, shook the 3 bullets loose. Didn't hear the back door hinge open, metal against metal. Didn't hear the slight give of the floorboards, saying something about pieces of life, about the falling apart, the coming together. He reached for the gun on the table, voice saying, "Hands on your goddamn head." Shotgun racking. Counted the seconds to his gun on the table, the loose bullets rolling back and forth against nothing but gravity. The voice behind setting the barrel against shoulder. Had set the shotgun against the table, moved forward, reached out for the gun, drove the stock into the man's jaw, his arms back into the floor, falling down onto elbows, wrists. He put the barrel of the shotgun into the man's shoulder, took a breath, saw himself blast the slug clear through a gaping hole through the bottom of the house into the earth, everything filling with blood. So that was a fiction. Best traditional tiki bar. Who, what, where? Latitude 29, New Orleans. When he opened his bar inside the French Quarter's Benville house, he had no choice but to make it a great one. Where? Who? What? When? 321 North Peter Street, Latitude 29, NOLA.com. So we're out of the Beyond Serious topics and back to Tim Struby after the best traditional tiki bar, of course. Who is this man and what has he done to boxing? His fingerprints are on ESPN2. This being the debut of an ESPN monthly boxing series that replaces the weekly Friday night fights. As the story unfolded, it was revealed that had raised $425 million to fund his attempt to return boxing to free TV, and in doing so to the national zeitgeist. Others flipped out, claiming is attempting to hijack the sport and put high-profile promoters and networks out of the boxing business. Back at the Sundome, however, the only thing blowing up is the 7,000 strong crowd. But in the fifth, the veteran hurts with a left hook to the body. As I join the sated masses heading for the doors, I run into Tim Smith, boxing's vice president of communications, aka the company flack. Genial and quick with a smile, Smith, a former New York Daily News boxing scribe, chats with a white-haired acquaintance from the boxing business. That is going to be like Dana White in the UFC, notes the old timer. When all is said and done, it's going to be much bigger than the UFC. This past May, the long-awaited bout, the most anticipated in recent memory, and the biggest pay-per-view prize fight in history, did only 4.4 million PPV buys. We used to be the number one sport, explains former HBO boxing czar, now a New York City-based promoter. HBO and Showtime have long carried the sport on their backs, helping to build stars. They've been siphoning off every bit of profit for themselves, even though it meant shrinking the fan base and driving down viewership. Bring boxing back to network television. Understandably, HBO and Showtime have little interest in boxing's return to network television because it represents competition. The promoters and managers didn't put up a fight because cable and PPV meant better money with less hassle. The previous November sat in the Cleveland arena and watched hundreds of fans cheering for his older brother Bobby, a professional prizefighter as he won his 18th bout. It isn't the afro or the stylish wide-colored shirt, but his cool Mona Lisa grin, behind which he seems to be saying, "That's right, bring it on." By the late 1980s, he was promoting top 100 R&B and jazz acts from Patti LaBelle to Freddie Jackson. The big time didn't translate to life in the fast lane. Drove into boxing after watching a fighter who reminded him of his brother. There's not a person in the boxing business who has taken better financial care of fighters. Berto knows this better than most. But then we started talking almost every day for 8 or 9 months, explains Berto. I've heard of only 2 boxers who have parted ways. Junior welterweight, who opted to remain, and who thought the grass would be greener with 50 cents, only to call it the biggest mistake of his life. In the co-feature of this NBCSN show, a pair of uninspired cruiserweights reluctantly paw at each other as if they have better places to be. Yet perched ringside I spy tonight's promoter of record in a fighter without whom PBC may never have come to be. He was one of the biggest concert promoters ever, and it was the best move ever made in his career. In 2006, in his ear, forked over $750,000 to buy out his top-ranked contract and become essentially a free agent. And after 2 decades in the music business, knew his side of the bargaining table. He was the toughest negotiator I've ever been around. He always delivered what he said he was going to. But he also used every bit of leverage he could to get his clients the best deals. Was a mediocre, bland super middleweight, the boxing equivalent of a Marlins Padres game. By 2013, he was signing fighters the way he buys cars, and the money, nearly $500,000, was provided by a $40 billion fund that had already sunk $1.5 billion into Formula One. Attempting to brand something, to create a new audience with a consistent, reliable product. Although both fighters collected earned decisions, the biggest winner that night was PBC. He's not taking time or resources to build up young fighters. I think the end game is simply to build investors. There was once a white CEO, an extraordinarily private man who never spoke to the media and sought to both revolutionize and dominate his industry. In July, top ranks jumped in, seeking $100 million in damages and citing both the Ally Act and the Sherman Antitrust Act. It fails if the damage to boxing is already too deep. If the bad decisions and mismatches and squandered fights and watered down weight classes and never heard of titles have finally left a permanent bad taste in people's mouths, then the sweet science may never again catch on. We'll have nothing to be ashamed of. To pull it off, for PBC to not just survive but thrive requires more than a high-def video board and Mary Albert calling the action. PBC has its share of potential household names, but none bigger than heavyweights. The big men still attract the boldest numbers, and the 6'7" 2008 Olympic bronze medalist has the best odds to fill the void left by the soon retiring Money Mayweather. A few good matchups might turn into mind-blowing sagas, fights so electrifying they seep into mainstream headlines, trilogies like those of, to include Marco Antonio Barrera, or the still talked about 2005 epic between PBC may have found its goal, who delivered a 12-round brawl and brought in an average of 1.2 million viewers, the largest boxing audience ESPN has pulled since 1998. But the great and sometimes tragic paradox of boxing is that what's best for the athlete is often not best for the sport. But the 34-year-old has been hinting at retirement, and in the 7th and 8th rounds, that looks more and more like a good idea. The first thing we must do is remove the bear. Throttling back. Pure water is bottled. Robert De Niro has charmed his fair share of beautiful women on screen, including Michelle Pfeiffer. But it's Miss August 2000 who woos the Oscar winner in Haste, a casino crime thriller now playing in theaters and streaming on demand. Dear Playboy, John Lishner, the film Manos, the Hands of Fate holds a special place in my heart. The battle over the worst movie ever made. John C. Vita, he doesn't deserve to be president because he's incompetent. Or does he deserve to be president because he's incompetent? Big Brother is watching you. Photograph Paul seriously. The bourbon boom can be mind-boggling. Combining the best of luxury and high performance into one supercar. Get your ass to bed. It's 4:22 a.m. Victor Frankenstein, what was the chemistry like between you and who plays Star Wars Battlefront? Break the cycle. 14 is the number of days after the exhibit debuted until the set had to be redesigned to prevent guests from posing inappropriately with the wax Nikki. Washington, D.C. I used to be able to keep going right through an orgasm without losing my erection. I expect Breaking Bad to be the lead line in my obituary. The wild legal days of the best drug ever and how it all ended. Big time. The barbershop renaissance prompts a deep question. Who is the modern man? Who is the modern man? President Theodore Roosevelt, I wish to preach not the doctrine of ignoble ease, but the doctrine of the strenuous life. When men fear work, they tremble on the brink of doom. Brotherly love. And when that guy happens to be royalty, the barber. Joel Stein. It's normal for tweens to be embarrassed by their parents, but they truly believe they've broken the millennium long chain of parent toleration. They think that because they wear jeans and listen to rock music like we do, that exempts them from being annoying, even though they clearly wear the wrong jeans and listen to terrible old rock. But that small amusement does not make up for allowing them access to an instantaneous method of annoying us. Our parents' texts are so boring that if they'd had access to texting back when they were dating, none of us would exist. Back when we were prepubescent and didn't know any better than to trust them, we revealed all our weaknesses we've since worked so hard to hide. And no, those aren't things I hear from my parents because there's no way I'm revealing my insecurities to you. It makes them look better to their friends, but they have no idea how to give us advice because the world has changed. If you offered me the best job in the world, but told me my boss would get to decide how much ice cream I could have at night, I would run the other direction. When we hit puberty and first figured out our parents were gathering intel on us, we smartly started to stonewall them by answering all questions with, I don't know. Steve Place. If you've been to a Nevada brothel lately, and the odds of that are increasingly slim, you know it may be the saddest place in America. Most are far from the glitter of the strip, surrounded by tumbleweed and secluded in the worst sense of the word. Perhaps the nation's handful of legal cat houses once enjoyed a catch, or even a sheen of respectability as a capitalist exchange between women who preferred the work and men who desired an encounter free of STDs, wallet theft, and blackmail. But everything about the modern brothel feels pathetically retro. These days, the clientele is likelier to be truckers passing through than sophisticated mafiosi of the casino vintage. And the buck doesn't stop with the end of the sex industry. Given the chance to lead in the same-sex marriage revolution, the state enacted a constitutional ban on the right in 2002, reversing course only after forced to by a federal court in 2014. Rather than legalize marijuana in 2006, when such flights of fancy were still shocking to our Bush-era sensitivities, voters defeated a proposed measure by 12 points. 6 years later, Colorado approved Amendment 64, ushering in $53 million in tax revenue in 2014 and more than a dozen weed-laced vacations and tours. And instead of approving a legalization ballot measure last March, after more than 100,000 signatures of support were delivered in a state of 1.4 million voters, lawmakers instead moved to defer the issue to 2016, by which point absolutely nobody in the U.S. will still care. George Flint, erstwhile lobbyist for the Nevada Brothel Owners Association, offers this bitter answer. California happened. Between 2005 and 2013, more than 425,000 Californians went east to a state with a population of 2.8 million on the promise of cheap real estate and nary an income tax to be seen. And they brought their conservative roots with them. When Hollywood Madam briefly floated the idea of opening a male brothel in 2005, groused it was bait for lawmakers to tighten industry regulations. During the Great Recession, when Nevada faced the nation's largest deficit as a percent of the state budget, and his allies practically begged the legislature to tax brothels better to ensure the industry's survival. In some ways, this was all foretold by the strip's transformation to 4.2 miles of roller coasters, animal exhibits, Magic shows in no fewer than 8 variations on Cirque du Soleil. The edgiest thing about what happens here stays here became how decidedly blasé the declaration was. Maybe this milquetoast, pale imitation of respectability, is what Las Vegas wanted to be when it grew up. Perhaps all along, Nevada was destined to be nothing more interesting than East California. Steve Price. And again, elsewhere, a rowdy bunch were beating the crap out of one another in a noisy game of Super Smash Brothers on a Wii, while a young woman sat with an iPad, trying to best the space adventure mobile game alone. The CVGA, which may be the coolest repository of knowledge since the Sumerians invented the library, boasts nearly 6,000 video games that can be played for free on more than 50 consoles, from the classic Atari 2600 to the Xbox 360 with Kinect. Actual FEC registered candidates for the 2016 presidential race in their party affiliations include Buddy the Cat, Democratic. And that was just some raw data. Burden process centerfold. What's the best thing about the process centerfold? Out of Washington, D.C. I looked on Amazon, but the only options were weird styles that came in confusing Asian sizes. I began to feel a real sense of loss and betrayal. Intellectual booty. This year's biggest teases and titillations on the big screen. Love, Inherent Vice, The Overnight, Ex Machina. Biggest bang for the buck. I don't think of myself as beautiful, but I know I have a deep sensual drive. And back to Steve Price. Trouble was, this wasn't a basketball game, but a feat for the 77-year-old standard bearer of a long, struggling political movement. More promising, Son was a freshman U.S. senator with overwhelming buzz as potential presidential timber if lost to Barack Obama, as was likely. There was cause for optimism in libertarian quarters that the body politic was, for the first time in decades, getting it. The honky-tonk music that blared forth was of a masculine, steel-strained variety. No political movement in modern America can succeed on testosterone alone. And what appeared to be a coming-out party at the Sundome, with banners and speeches proclaiming libertarianism here to stay and taking root, is likely to remain the movement's high-water mark unless it can find a way to appeal to the other half of the American electorate. It has the most extreme gender gap in the bunch, but writ large libertarianism is a widespread and troublesome turnoff to women. This is partly due to branding. Some people are both, but the most prominent are the Pauls, who all work their magic from within the Republican Party. In real life, the women they knew hassled them to be compassionate, generous, thoughtful, loyal. To this end, women who might otherwise be libertarians become Republicans because their party proposes a government that helps people less, but at least a little. And those are news and topics. And we're going to go quickly into our fashion and action. Libertarians, that sounds quite interesting. Libertarians, could that work? Libertarians, Republicans, and Democrats. So we have libertarians. Okay, like right there when I said it out loud, I was like, it sounds like an awesome idea, right? But the challenges of that. So photographs by Michael Bernard. Illustration, Amanda Mokel. $0.60. Monica Sims for Miss September. Johnny Walker. Photography, Mary Ellen Matthews. Mark Mason. West Virginia University representing. Photography, Mark Mann. Photography, Chris Buck. Photography, Paul Sira Salif. And again. Chris Hemsworth for Mr. January. Hair, Chris McMillan. I think we're going to put this in dollars by itself, just to be on the same side. Yes, out of Cuba. Totally awesome segment, of course, which we are at right now. And that is hair, Chris McMillan, with manicure, Nikki Spolaris. Sleepy Beauty. Dear Playboy, David Bussabarger out of Missouri. The relevant question is not whether performance-enhancing drugs are fair or safe, but whether we wish to allow athletes to use pharmaceuticals to enhance their performance. If PEDs were legalized, everyone, regardless of sex or age, who wished to be competitive would by necessity be forced to use PEDs. So again, that's regarding the dope story. Inform, July and August. And John Shakora from San Antonio, Texas, where's the Rebbe's bow tie? So we're in Totally Awesome, Asada Kuba, Dallas Buyers Club. Tanash. Her sophomore album, Joyride, is one of the fall's most anticipated get to know the girl behind the music at her Becoming Attraction shoot. Black Sails. Jared Smith. Christopher Sander brilliantly examines how our future is beginning to look less like the one visited in Back to the Future Part 2, and more like the one George Orwell envisioned in 1984. Not if they're like any other Big Brother I've ever met. And Paul De Gorgio from Saratoga Springs, New York. Captivating presence personifies everything a magazine was, is, and shall ever be, a celebration of all things female, beauty, talent, and charm. Brock Bevan out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It is not the military or even the broken political system that controls it. That's to blame. Don't you just love stuff like, don't you just love labor? Like Brock Bevan out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's like Paul De Gorgio from Saratoga Springs, New York. Just love it. But that's totally awesome. Out of Cuba, Dallas Basketball. And before we go to our BT views, we have our out-of-network spotlight. Real quick, real simple. real short and sweet. Our out of network spotlight, Kleinfeld. Kleinfeld. Our out of network spotlight. So that was a lot to cover. Compiling all those Playboy contributions of Cosmopolitan. So you get to where we're at right now, which is BT views. And so let's just get right to it. And as always, hope that those of you viewing it with Google YouTube will stay tuned for the closing. So we've added mob wives to the viewings. And so it ended with where the viewing stopped with Drita and Carla at the gym. Like, how do you do that? The weights look the same. We're like both doing that. How is that possible? How can we do that together? It's like not even about like, you're from this part of Staten Island or, and you're from this part of Staten Island or, whatever. When it's just like, how can we do that here? But anyway, I'm thinking like Girl on Fire. Drew get in the car. I'm like, it's like a Girl on Fire moment. So this has been a Late Late Show with BT. Bye.